Ethan Plath's private emotions weren't meant to be broadcast, yet what slipped into the public eye felt like a gut punch. The whispers of his resentment, his judgment, his lingering anger landed with the force of betrayal, not only against his wife Olivia, but also against the very image the Plaths built for years. And Olivia, tired of living under the weight of silence, dropped her own confession, raw, vulnerable, and unfiltered. For fans who watched the family's carefully constructed facade of faith and purity, it was shocking. How can a family that prides itself on spiritual devotion and moral discipline produce wounds this deep? How can a marriage meant to symbolize love and unity instead turn into a battlefield of hypocrisy and control? Hi friends, my name is Sophie, and welcome back to Reality Scandals Daily. If you love exposing the truths behind reality TV families and seeing the cracks in the stories they don't want us to notice, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below because I want to know what you think about this unfolding chaos in Welcome to Plathville. This isn't just about one couple fighting. This is about a family system built on rigid faith that now bleeds into every relationship, every conflict, every confession. Ethan's judgment isn't isolated. It's the echo of the environment he grew up in. Olivia's tears aren't just about her marriage. They're a cry against a culture of silence. What happens when the teachings you were raised to believe in start to suffocate you? What happens when love is tangled in rules, shame, and control? Tonight, we're peeling back those layers, and it starts with Ethan's resentment coming to light and Olivia finally refusing to keep quiet. The Plath family's story didn't begin with conflict. It began with a picture-perfect image. Kim and Barry Plath carefully shaped their household into Waisid Nin Okingis. Had they wanted the world to see, a God-fearing, tradition-bound family where faith was the cornerstone and purity was the goal. They lived on a farm in rural Georgia, raised their children without the so-called corrupting influences of modern life, and presented themselves as almost idyllic, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Music became their calling card. The family band was paraded as proof that values, discipline, and unity created something beautiful. TLC seized on that image, marketing the Plaths as a refreshing throwback, wholesome, innocent, almost too good to be true. And that's exactly the problem, because it was. From the very first season of Welcome to Plathville, cracks in the perfect picture began to show. Viewers were stunned by the restrictions placed on the children. No soda, no sugar, no TV, no internet. Basic parts of childhood in most American households were off limits. Homeschooling wasn't just an education choice. It was a tool to keep outside ideas at bay. The children weren't allowed to date, explore fashion, or even develop friendships outside of approved circles. Kim and Barry sold this lifestyle as protection, but it looked a lot more like control. Take the episode where Ethan introduced Olivia to his family's world. It was clear she was stepping into a culture of limits, where even something as simple as a can of Coke or a pop song could spark conflict. Or the scenes where Moriah and Micah pushed back against their parents' rules, only to be met with disappointment and judgment. These moments weren't accidents. They were glimpses into the hidden dysfunction behind the family's supposed purity. The hypocrisy becomes clearer the more you look. The Plaths claim their rules came from a place of love and faith, but what played out on screen felt less like guidance and more like fear disguised as virtue. How can parents insist on purity while ignoring the emotional cost of isolation? How can family values mean shutting down individuality? The perfect image TLC promoted wasn't just unrealistic. It was a mask covering a system where control was valued over compassion. And behind that mask, the cracks in the Plath legacy were already spreading. Ethan Plath grew up as the golden child of the Plath household, the one who followed the rules without question. From the time he was a boy, he learned that obedience wasn't optional, it was survival. No soda, no TV, no secular music, no outside friends. His world was built within the carefully drawn boundaries of Kim and Barry's beliefs, and he carried that conditioning with him into adulthood. On the surface, Ethan seemed like the ideal product of his parents' system, polite, hardworking, and loyal. But underneath, he was a young man who had never been given the tools to navigate conflict, compromise, or independence. Those gaps would eventually define not just his personal struggles, but also his marriage. When Ethan married Olivia, it was supposed to be his great escape, a chance to build a life away from his parents' suffocating rules. But instead of freedom, he found himself torn between two worlds. Olivia wanted authenticity, growth, and space to breathe. Ethan, still tethered to the habits of his upbringing, found himself caught in a tug of war, one hand reaching for his wife's independence, the other still clinging to his parents' approval. The marriage quickly became less about love and more about loyalty tests. Was he a son first or a husband first? Episodes of Welcome to Plathville captured the fallout vividly. We saw Ethan's frustration boil over in explosive arguments with Olivia, where anger replaced understanding. He shut down conversations, refused to meet her halfway, and in some cases, stormed out rather than face uncomfortable truths. His inability to compromise wasn't just stubbornness, it was a reflection of the rigid environment he came from. In moments where Olivia begged for empathy, Ethan often responded with judgment, echoing the same critical tone his parents had used for years. That's the heartbreaking irony. Ethan desperately wanted to escape his parents' control, yet in his marriage, he sometimes became them. His black and white thinking, his struggle to handle conflict with grace, his instinct to shut down rather than communicate, these weren't random flaws. They were the inherited traits of a system that valued obedience over self-awareness. And while Olivia fought to break free from that system, Ethan carried it with him like invisible chains. Ethan's contradictions make him one of the most fascinating and tragic figures in the Plath saga. He's both a victim of his upbringing and a mirror of it, trying to love while carrying the weight of judgment. Trapped between loyalty to his family and commitment to his wife, Ethan shows us what happens when the rules of a rigid past collide with the messy reality of adulthood. When Olivia Plath entered the Plath family, she wasn't just marrying Ethan, she was stepping into a culture that had been sealed tight for decades. As an outsider, she noticed things the children had been conditioned to accept as normal: the endless restrictions, the emotional distance, the unspoken rule that obedience came before individuality. What the kids couldn't see from the inside, Olivia immediately recognized as dysfunction. And in many ways, that perspective made her dangerous to Kim and Barry. She didn't just play the role of daughter-in-law, she became the mirror reflecting back everything the family wanted to hide. From her earliest appearances on Welcome to Plathville, Olivia's clashes with Kim and Barry became some of the most explosive moments on screen. Viewers saw her push back against the family's suffocating standards, questioning why soda or music could be treated like moral failures, challenging Kim's authority and refusing to stay silent when control crossed the line into manipulation. Her marriage with Ethan placed her in the crossfire. He was torn between loyalty to the parents who raised him and the wife who was finally voicing the words he couldn't bring himself to say. Olivia herself has admitted in confessional interviews that she felt controlled, silenced, and pushed into a mold that didn't fit. She spoke candidly about the suffocating expectations placed on her. Expectations not just to conform, but to comply without question. Yet what made her presence so powerful was her refusal to stay quiet. Time and again, she chose authenticity over comfort, even when it meant alienation from Ethan or explosive fights with Kim and Barry. Her breaking points carried immense emotional weight on screen. In one episode, Olivia's tears flowed as she admitted that keeping silent had cost her peace, her joy, and nearly her marriage. In another, she laid bare how exhausting it was to always be the one fighting for basic freedom, whether it was choosing her clothing, setting her boundaries, or simply being allowed to exist without judgment. These weren't just reality TV dramatics. They were glimpses into a woman fighting to hold on to her sense of self. That's what positions Olivia as the reluctant but necessary truth-teller in this saga. She didn't seek out conflict for the sake of it. She wasn't trying to destroy the Plath family image. Instead, her courage came from refusing to accept silence as survival. In exposing the cracks in the Plath legacy, Olivia showed viewers that honesty, however painful, is sometimes the only path to freedom. And in doing so, she became not just Ethan's wife, but the voice the Plath children and the audience needed to finally hear. Moriah and Micah Plath became the living proof that the Plath family's grip on its children couldn't last forever. Where Ethan wrestled with divided loyalties, his younger siblings chose open rebellion, and in doing so, they exposed just how fragile the perfect family facade really was. Moriah's journey stood out from the start. From her bold fashion choices to her music, she carved an identity completely at odds with the strict purity culture she was raised in. One of the most memorable episodes showed her dyeing her hair and stepping out in clothes her parents never would have approved, acts that weren't just about style, but about survival. Through music, she found her voice, turning personal pain into lyrics that resonated with anyone who's ever felt trapped. Her relationships, too, became a declaration of independence, even when they led to heartbreak. Moriah wasn't trying to be perfect. She was trying to be free. Micah's rebellion was different, but just as telling. With modeling as his escape, he embraced a world of cameras, fashion shoots, and self-expression that stood in sharp contrast to the sheltered farm life he'd known. His career choice symbolized more than ambition. It was a rejection of invisibility. He wasn't going to live hidden away. He wanted to be seen, and on his own terms. The younger siblings' defiance highlighted a striking contrast within the family. While Ethan wrestled with guilt and Olivia carried the burden of truth-telling, Moriah and Micah leaned fully into independence, showing that the Plath legacy wasn't unbreakable. Their choices illuminated a painful reality. The stricter the rules, the deeper the cracks when rebellion finally came. By the time these episodes aired, the cracks in the Plath facade were no longer subtle, they were gaping. The family that once marketed itself as pure, faithful, and united was now fractured on national television. Each step Moriah and Micah took toward freedom was another reminder that control cannot masquerade as love forever. Ethan and Olivia's marriage became the emotional battleground where all the Plath family's hypocrisy came to light. What began as a union filled with hope quickly unraveled under the weight of interference, mistrust, and unhealed wounds from Ethan's upbringing. Episodes showed arguments that weren't just about household disagreements, but about loyalty, whether Ethan belonged to his wife or his parents. Every unresolved fight between them carried the shadow of Kim and Barry's control, making it nearly impossible for Ethan and Olivia to build a foundation of trust. The family's constant involvement only deepened the divide. Instead of offering support, Kim and Barry's manipulation pushed Ethan to retreat into anger and Olivia to retreat into pain. Faith, which should have been a source of guidance and love, was instead wielded as a weapon, used to shame, silence, and dictate behavior. For Ethan, this meant internalizing guilt whenever he chose his wife over his parents. For Olivia, it meant feeling like her marriage was always under surveillance. What should have been a private relationship turned into a public battlefield where love struggled to survive. The cost of this hypocrisy rippled far beyond Ethan and Olivia. Siblings who once leaned on each other for strength became alienated, some choosing independence while others clung to loyalty. The family that branded itself as a beacon of purity and faith was left fractured, with scars visible to anyone watching. The emotional toll was unmistakable. Broken trust, fractured marriages, and siblings who could barely recognize one another. In the end, the tragedy of the Plaths isn't just that their secrets were exposed, it's that the values they preached were never lived. Faith without love became control, family without trust became division, and purity without compassion became hypocrisy. The cost of that hypocrisy wasn't just a tarnished reputation. It was the very relationships that once defined the Plath family. TLC's fingerprints are all over the Plath family saga, and their role can't be ignored. From the very beginning, the network packaged the Plaths' rigid lifestyle as a curiosity, marketing their faith, music, and old-fashioned values as wholesome entertainment. But what TLC really sold wasn't purity, it was dysfunction. By centering storylines on Ethan and Olivia's marital collapse, Moriah's rebellion, and Kim and Barry's control, the network turned private pain into prime-time drama. The formula is familiar. Take a family who markets themselves as different, peel back the curtain to reveal cracks, and keep the cameras rolling as those cracks widen into chasms. For TLC, dysfunction equals ratings. And while the show presents itself as offering insight into unique family structures, the reality is far darker. The network profits from the breakdown of marriages, from the alienation of siblings, and from the misuse of faith as control. Even the way TLC frames inclusion deserves scrutiny. On the surface, the show gives voice to Olivia, Moriah, and Micah as they push back against the family's rules. But these moments of resistance are edited and packaged for maximum drama, raising the uncomfortable question, Is this empowerment or exploitation? And that's where the audience comes in. By tuning in week after week, are we complicit in turning another family's trauma into entertainment? We watch Ethan's anger, Olivia's tears, and Moriah's rebellion unfold, but we rarely see healing, only cliffhangers designed to keep us hooked. The deeper question remains, at what point does documenting dysfunction stop being storytelling and start becoming exploitation? TLC has mastered that blurry line, leaving us to wrestle with whether the cost of entertainment is worth the damage done. As we reach the end of this story, it's impossible not to feel the weight of everything that's unfolded in the Plath family. Ethan's contradictions, raised in strict faith yet projecting judgment and control, have caused deep wounds in his marriage to Olivia. Her courage in speaking honestly, showing the emotional cost of silence, has exposed truths that many viewers never expected to see on a family-friendly show. Meanwhile, Moriah, Micah, and the younger siblings remind us that independence and self-expression come at a cost, but also serve as a necessary break from control and hypocrisy. TLC, of course, has profited from all of this, turning private struggles into public spectacle while presenting a glossy image of inclusivity and family values. The network's role forces us to ask ourselves some hard questions. What happens when truth is buried for profit? How much are we complicit as viewers watching tears, arguments, and broken relationships unfold as entertainment? I want to hear what you think. Comment below with your thoughts on Ethan, Olivia, and the rest of the Plath family. Do you think TLC should be held accountable for how they present these stories? Make sure to subscribe to Reality Scandals Daily so you don't miss any updates or new revelations about your favorite reality shows. And remember, this story isn't over. The fallout continues, and future episodes will keep revealing new layers of conflict, truth, and perhaps even reconciliation. Stay tuned because with the Plaths, nothing is ever simple, and every revelation seems to spark more drama than the last.